The cold metal floor was the only constant in Lily's existence now. She curled up tightly, her silvery skin faintly glowing blue, barely piercing the suffocating darkness around her. The glow, once vibrant and steady, now flickered like a dying ember, a silent testament to her weakening state. It had been 3 cycles, 3 endless stretches of time since the ravagers had obliterated her world. Everything she knew, loved, and cherished was gone, reduced to ashes, while she was dragged away, another trophy of war. Her cell was a tomb, bare walls, a thin sleeping mat, and a small, dented bowl of nutrient paste pushed through a slot twice daily. That was the sum of her world. The nutrient paste was just enough to keep her alive, though alive was a relative term. The Starborn were resilient, needing little to sustain themselves, but this existence tested even their endurance. Lily had once thrived in sunlight, her glowing skin a beacon of vitality and joy. Now, in this oppressive darkness, her light barely clung to her. She shivered, though it wasn't from the cold. Memories clawed at the edges of her mind. Her homeworld had been a haven, a place of beauty and harmony, where the Starborn lived in symbiosis with the cosmos. She remembered warm days filled with laughter, her family's faces shining like her own under the gentle light of their twin suns. Then came the invasion. The ravagers descended like a plague, their massive ships blotting out the skies. Lily could still hear the screams, feel the ground trembling beneath the relentless bombardment. They tore through her world without mercy, enslaving those they deemed useful and exterminating the rest. Lily clutched her knees to her chest, trying to silence the echoes of the past. But the cell had a way of amplifying her torment. Every drip of condensation from the ceiling, every faint hum of the ship's machinery, seemed to stretch endlessly, mocking her inability to escape. The darkness wasn't just physical. It seeped into her mind, wrapping itself around her thoughts like a vice. Her captors never spoke to her. The ravagers were efficient in their cruelty, treating her as nothing more than cargo. The slot would open twice a day, a mechanical hand shoving in the paste before it slammed shut again. There were no words, no explanations, no acknowledgement of her existence beyond the bare minimum required to keep her breathing. The silence was worse than insults or threats. It made her feel invisible, as if she were already dead, just waiting for her body to catch up. Still, something within her refused to give in completely. Perhaps it was instinct, or perhaps it was the faintest spark of hope that some cosmic force might intervene. The glow of her skin, dim as it was, reminded her of what she had been, of the light she once carried. It was a fragile thread connecting her to her identity, a thread she clung to with all her might. Lily shifted slightly, wincing as her weakened muscles protested. The mat beneath her offered no real comfort, its thin fabric barely cushioning her from the unforgiving floor. She traced her fingers over the surface, feeling the cool, smooth texture of the metal beneath. Her cell might as well have been her grave, but she refused to let it become her end. Her thoughts wandered to the others. Were there others? She had heard faint sounds in the distance, a muffled cry, the clang of chains, but she had never seen another prisoner. The ravagers were meticulous, ensuring their captives remained isolated, broken by loneliness. It was a tactic as old as war itself, and it worked. Lily had felt her resolve waver more times than she cared to admit. The past 3 cycles had stripped away everything she thought she knew about herself. She had always considered herself strong, a fighter. Yet here she was, reduced to little more than a shell of the Starborn she had once been. The realization stung, but it also sparked a flicker of defiance. Even in the depths of her despair, she refused to let the ravagers win completely. If she could hold onto even the smallest part of herself, they hadn't truly broken her. A sound broke through her thoughts, sharper than the usual hum of the ship. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. A soft clinking noise, like metal striking metal. Lily's heart raced. It wasn't the ravagers' usual rhythm. They moved with heavy, deliberate steps, their boots echoing ominously through the corridors. This sound was different, almost hesitant, as if someone or something was trying to avoid detection. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more. The glow of her skin dimmed further, instinctively cloaking her in shadows. Fear and curiosity warred within her. It could be nothing, perhaps just the ship settling or another prisoner too far away to reach. But the thought that it might be something, someone, filled her with a fragile hope she hadn't dared to feel in cycles. The sound grew louder, closer. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to steady herself. If it was one of the ravagers, she had no way to defend herself. Her weakened state left her at their mercy, a thought that sent a chill down her spine. But if it was something else, she closed her eyes, focusing on the faint hum of her own energy. Her people had always been connected to the cosmos, their light a reflection of the stars that birthed them. She let that thought ground her, a small anchor in the storm of her fear. Whatever was coming, she would face it. She had to. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. Lily held her breath, every muscle in her body tense. A faint creak echoed through the air, the sound of metal shifting. She realized with a start that it was coming from her cell door. The sound of the cell door opening was almost surreal, breaking the monotony of Lily's bleak reality. For a moment, she wondered if she was imagining it, her mind playing cruel tricks born of desperation. But then, a figure stepped into the dim light, and the sight shocked her into motion. A human, someone unfamiliar, someone not like her captors. He moved with careful precision, his body tense yet purposeful, scanning the room as though he had expected something entirely different. Lily recoiled instinctively, pressing herself against the far wall. She didn't trust the sudden presence of another being, especially one that wasn't starborn. His appearance was foreign to her, rough, scarred, and yet undeniably human. He knelt down slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening, raising his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. His eyes met hers, filled with something she hadn't seen in what felt like an eternity. Concern. The man spoke softly, his voice cutting through the heavy silence of the cell. He introduced himself as Ethan, though the name meant little to her. His words were measured, calm, as if he were coaxing a frightened animal. Lily remained frozen, her glowing skin flickering weakly in response to her heightened anxiety. Ethan didn't rush her. He waited, maintaining a respectful distance, as though he understood the fragile state she was in. It wasn't until he mentioned escape that her focus sharpened. The word jolted something deep within her, a spark of hope that had long been buried under layers of despair. She didn't fully trust him. How could she? Yet, the thought of leaving this place, of reclaiming even a sliver of freedom, was too tempting to ignore. Ethan explained briefly that he had infiltrated the Ravager's ship in search of captives. His mission, he said, was to rescue as many as he could. The sincerity in his tone was undeniable, and despite her fear, Lily found herself nodding. Ethan extended a hand, but Lily hesitated. Her body was weak, her spirit even weaker, and the idea of relying on a stranger was almost as terrifying as staying in the cell. But something in his demeanor, his patience, his unwavering gaze, convinced her to take the risk. She reached out tentatively, her fingers trembling as they touched his. His grip was firm yet gentle, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in cycles. The journey out of the cell was fraught with tension. Ethan moved ahead, his every step deliberate and soundless, guiding Lily through the labyrinthine corridors of the Ravager's ship. She struggled to keep up, her legs unsteady from weeks of confinement, but Ethan slowed his pace whenever he noticed her faltering. He carried a small device that emitted faint pulses of light, which he used to scan the area for potential threats. Lily watched him with a mix of awe and apprehension, marveling at his efficiency while silently dreading the possibility of being caught. Their progress was slow, each turn in the corridor a gamble. The ship was alive with the distant sounds of machinery and the occasional echo of footsteps, keeping both of them on edge. Ethan seemed to anticipate every potential obstacle, motioning for her to stop or follow based on signals she didn't fully understand, but trusted nonetheless. At one point, they ducked into an alcove as a patrol of ravagers passed by, their heavy boots reverberating through the walls. Lily's breath hitched as they drew closer, her glowing skin dimming instinctively in an attempt to blend into the shadows. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying her nerves until the patrol moved on. As they continued, Ethan began to speak in hushed tones, perhaps to distract her from the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. He told her about the resistance movement. He was a part of a network of individuals from various species who worked together to oppose the Ravagers' tyranny. His words painted a picture of camaraderie and determination, a stark contrast to the isolation and despair Lily had known. She listened intently, her trust in him growing with every step they took. When they reached a secure area, Ethan paused to assess their next move. He glanced at Lily, noticing the strain in her expression, and handed her a small flask of water. She hesitated, unaccustomed to acts of kindness, but the desperation in her body overruled her caution. The cool liquid soothed her parched throat, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel grateful. Ethan began to explain the layout of the ship, outlining the path they needed to take to reach the escape pods. His voice was calm, almost clinical, as he detailed the risks involved. Lily nodded, though her mind swirled with doubt. She wasn't sure she had the strength to make it. Her legs felt like lead, and every step was an effort. But Ethan's presence was a beacon, his quiet determination igniting a sliver of courage within her. As they moved forward, Lily noticed something shifting within her. The fear that had gripped her so tightly began to loosen its hold. She still felt vulnerable, but Ethan's unwavering focus and steady demeanor gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of safety. It was fragile, tentative, but it was enough to keep her moving. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time, Lily began to believe that escape was possible. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, a reminder of how much she had lost and how much she still had to fight for. Ethan's presence was a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there could be light. They pressed on, the corridors stretching endlessly before them. Every step was a gamble, every sound a potential threat. But Lily clung to the hope that had been reignited within her, following Ethan through the shadows, toward a future she could barely imagine but desperately needed. The sound of alarms reverberated through the corridors, sending a jolt of urgency through Lily as she followed Ethan. Their pace quickened, each step resonating with the unspoken knowledge that discovery was no longer a distant possibility. It was imminent. The path to freedom was fraught with obstacles, but turning back was not an option. The ship seemed to awaken with hostility, its systems and guards responding to the breach with ruthless efficiency. Ethan stayed ahead, his movements sharp and deliberate, scanning for threats and signaling Lily when to follow. Their first challenge came in the form of a sealed bulkhead. Ethan produced a small, handheld device and worked to override the lock while Lily kept watch. Her glowing skin dimmed instinctively, her body attuned to the danger surrounding them. The seconds dragged as the sound of boots grew louder in the distance. Lily's pulse raced as she heard Ethan mutter under his breath, urging the device to work faster. With a hiss, the door slid open, and they slipped through, narrowly avoiding a patrol that passed just moments later. The corridors twisted and turned, their design as much a trap as a navigational challenge. The Ravager's ship was massive, its scale designed to intimidate and disorient. Lily's frailty weighed heavily on her, but she pushed herself forward, driven by a flicker of resolve she hadn't felt in cycles. Ethan glanced back frequently, his expression a mix of focus and concern. His movements were precise, his familiarity with such missions evident, but even he couldn't predict everything. They were spotted before they reached the next checkpoint. a security drone emerged from a side corridor, its mechanical eye locking onto them with an ominous red glow. Ethan acted immediately, raising his weapon and firing a precise shot that sent the drone crashing to the ground. The noise, however, was enough to alert nearby guards. Lily tensed as shouts echoed through the halls, followed by the unmistakable clatter of approaching footsteps. Ethan pulled her into a side passage, his voice low but firm as he gave instructions. She nodded, her fear overridden by the urgency of the situation. The chase that followed was a blur of motion and noise. They darted through narrow corridors, ducking into alcoves and weaving through maintenance shafts to avoid their pursuers. At one point, Ethan engaged in a brief but intense skirmish with a pair of ravagers. Lily watched, her breath catching, as he dispatched them with calculated precision, his movements a blend of experience and sheer determination. As they pressed on, the environment became increasingly hostile. The ship's security systems activated, and automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments. Ethan destroyed one with a well-placed shot, but another fired before he could react. The blast scorched the wall near Lily, forcing her to throw herself to the ground. The smell of burnt metal filled the air as Ethan disabled the turret, his jaw clenched with frustration. He helped her to her feet, his grip steady despite the chaos. Their path took them through a storage bay, a cavernous space filled with crates and equipment. It provided temporary cover, but the sound of approaching ravagers reminded them that safety was fleeting. Ethan searched the area quickly, locating a control panel. He used it to create a diversion, triggering an explosion in a distant part of the ship. The resulting chaos bought them precious minutes, allowing them to slip away unnoticed. The final stretch to the docking bay was the most perilous. The ravagers had fortified the area, anticipating any attempt to escape. Ethan and Lily paused in the shadows, assessing the situation. The guards were heavily armed, their patrol patterns tight and coordinated. Ethan's expression hardened as he formulated a plan. He handed Lily a small device, explaining its purpose in a few terse words. She nodded, clutching it tightly, her determination overshadowing her fear. Ethan moved first, drawing the guards' attention with a calculated assault. His precision was unmatched, his movements a testament to his years of experience. Lily used the opportunity to follow his instructions, slipping through the chaos to activate the device he had given her. It emitted a burst of light and sound, temporarily disorienting the guards and giving Ethan the upper hand. The battle that followed was chaotic and intense. Ethan fought with relentless focus, his skill and resourcefulness keeping the ravagers at bay. Lily, though untrained, found herself acting on instinct. Her starborn abilities, dulled by captivity, began to resurface. Her glowing skin pulsed with a faint but growing energy, and she used it to create brief distractions, buying Ethan critical moments. Each action took a toll on her, but she refused to falter. The turning point came when they reached the docking bay's control center. Ethan disabled the bay's security systems, opening a path to the escape pods. The noise drew reinforcements, and the ravagers closed in with alarming speed. Lily's body trembled with exhaustion, but she stood beside Ethan, determined to see the mission through. Together, they fought back, their movements a coordinated dance of survival. As the last guard fell, Ethan motioned for Lily to follow him to an escape pod. The bay was a scene of destruction, smoke and sparks filling the air as the ship's alarms blared in protest. Lily's legs felt like lead, her energy nearly depleted, but she pushed herself forward. Ethan helped her into the pod, his hand steadying her as he activated the launch sequence. The doors sealed, and the pod detached with a jolt, propelling them into the void of space. For a moment there was silence. The chaos of the ship was replaced by the stillness of the stars. Lily leaned back, her body trembling as relief and exhaustion washed over her. Ethan sat beside her, his expression a mix of weariness and quiet triumph. They had escaped, but the journey was far from over. As the ship faded into the distance, Lily allowed herself a small, tentative smile. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was free. The pod's interior hummed with a low, steady vibration as it drifted through the quiet vastness of space. For the first time in cycles, Lily felt the absence of chains, confinement, and relentless fear. The view through the small window was overwhelming. Stars stretching endlessly, a serene contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Her gaze lingered on the distant pinpricks of light, her silvery skin faintly glowing as her body began to adjust to freedom. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't shake the unfamiliar sensation of relief. Ethan worked silently at the pod's controls, his focus unwavering as he navigated to their destination. Lily watched him, her curiosity tempered by lingering apprehension. This human had risked his life to save her, yet she barely knew him. The concept of trust was foreign after her time in captivity, but his actions spoke louder than words. He had given her a chance to live, a chance she had stopped believing she would ever have. The pod eventually entered the atmosphere of a small, isolated moon, its descent smooth despite the visible wear on the vessel. When they landed, the hatch opened to reveal a landscape unlike anything Lily had seen before. Lush greenery stretched across rolling hills, the air thick with the scent of life. The warmth of the sun touched her skin, and she shivered, not from cold, but from the startling realization of what she had been missing. Ethan led her to a small, concealed refuge nestled within the terrain. It was modest but functional, a sanctuary designed for survival and privacy. Inside, Ethan busied himself with unpacking supplies while Lily stood awkwardly, her body unsure of its place in this new environment. Her muscles ached, her steps unsteady, but the soft ground beneath her feet was a welcome change from the unyielding metal floors of the Ravager's ship. Ethan handed her a small package, motioning for her to eat. She opened it cautiously, the aroma of real food flooding her senses. The first bite was a revelation, the taste and texture unlike the bland paste she had been fed in captivity. She ate slowly, savoring each moment. Days passed, and the quiet routine of the refuge began to soothe Lily's frayed nerves. Ethan respected her silence, giving her space to process her thoughts while offering quiet support when needed. He showed her around the area, explaining the basics of survival on the moon and how to use the equipment in the shelter. His patience surprised her, his every action marked by a calm efficiency that seemed to put her at ease. Gradually, Lily began to speak, her voice hesitant at first, but gaining strength as she recounted fragments of her life before the Ravagers. Ethan listened without interruption, his expression somber as he absorbed the weight of her words. Lily found herself reflecting on her time in captivity, the memories surfacing with less bitterness and more clarity as the days went on. She realized that survival had not been her only achievement. She had retained a piece of herself despite the Ravagers' efforts to break her. Her natural glow, once dim and inconsistent, began to shine steadily again, a physical manifestation of her slowly rebuilding spirit. Ethan noticed the change, offering a rare smile that reassured her she was on the right path. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the horizon, Ethan shared his own story. He spoke of the Resistance, a coalition of individuals and species united against the Ravagers' reign of terror. His involvement had come at great personal cost, but he believed in the cause with unwavering conviction. Lily listened intently, her earlier skepticism replaced by a growing respect for this man who had risked everything for people he didn't even know. His words ignited something within her, a desire to contribute to the fight against the forces that had destroyed her home. Ethan began teaching her basic survival skills, from repairing equipment to defending herself. Though her physical strength was still limited, her starborn abilities provided her with unique advantages. She discovered that her glow could be amplified and directed, creating bursts of light strong enough to disorient or blind potential threats. Ethan encouraged her to explore this ability further, helping her refine its use. With each small success, Lily felt her confidence grow, her once dormant potential awakening in ways she hadn't imagined. The days turned into weeks, and Lily began to adapt to her new life. The refuge became more than a shelter. It became a place of renewal. She found solace in the simple routines, the quiet companionship she shared with Ethan, and the growing strength in her body and mind. She started to see herself not as a victim, but as a survivor, someone who had endured unimaginable pain yet emerged with the determination to fight back. One day, Ethan introduced her to a communication device linked to the Resistance network. He explained their need for allies, individuals who could provide intelligence, resources, or direct support. Lily hesitated, the weight of her past threatening to pull her back into silence. But then she remembered the faces of her family, the countless lives destroyed by the ravagers, and the glimmer of hope she had felt when Ethan first opened her cell door. She agreed to help, her resolve solidifying with every passing moment. Her first contribution came in the form of information. Drawing on her time as a captive, she described the layout of the ravagers' ship, their routines, and the weaknesses she had observed. The Resistance members on the other end of the transmission listened intently, their gratitude evident even through the distorted audio. It was a small step, but it marked the beginning of Lily's transformation from a prisoner to a vital part of the fight against oppression. Ethan and Lily began working together more closely, their partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They trained together, each learning from the other, their skills complementing one another in ways neither had anticipated. Lily's light became a symbol of hope, her ability to illuminate even the darkest spaces, both literal and metaphorical. Ethan's steady presence provided the foundation she needed to fully embrace her role in the Resistance. As time passed, Lily began to dream of a future beyond survival. She envisioned a galaxy where the Ravagers' tyranny was a distant memory, where the starborn and other species could thrive without fear. It was an ambitious dream, one that seemed impossibly far away, but it fueled her determination. With Ethan by her side and the Resistance behind her, she believed they could make it a reality. One night, under a sky filled with stars, Lily stood beside Ethan and gazed at the vast expanse above. The weight of her journey was still with her, but it no longer defined her. She was more than a captive, more than a survivor. She was a beacon of light, ready to shine in the fight against darkness. Together, they prepared to take the next step, their resolve unwavering as they faced the challenges ahead. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if echoing the quiet strength that now defined her.